What's going on, guys? Today we're looking at 5 incredibly fun and powerful builds that you guys can use in Elden Ring through your entire playthrough. Some of these builds are going to be level 170 and have some DLC weapons, so be prepared for that, but they're all incredibly fun to use. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the very first one. Our first build we're going to be looking at here is going to be the Bloodfiends Fork. This is a really awesome bleed spear that is going to utilize blood tax in this case in order to not only get our blood loss up to 118, but also absolutely crush every single enemy we come across. You're going to be building up hemorrhage incredibly fast, while at the same time getting some decent physical damage. The spears are also going to have that standard and pierce damage, and pierce damage is that one damage type that every single enemy is weak to in Elden Ring. I very much enjoyed my playtime with this particular build, and I think what I've put together synergizes very well if you love a spear type moveset and using a spear in general. We're going to get some okay scaling with this weapon. When we put a bleed affinity on it, we're going to get strength C and arcane C, but with our stats being strength and arcane for this particular build, that's going to work out just fine, and our hemorrhage procs are going to be huge. We're going to be putting together as much damage as possible with the gear and talismans that we've chosen, as well as the flask, and per usual, anytime there's a bleed build, we're going to be utilizing things like the White Mask and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation to get that immediate 30% increase attack power boost whenever blood loss is in the vicinity. So for this build, we're going to be using the Bloodfiends Fork with blood tax on it, as well as the White Mask for our armor and the Rakshasa armor set for extra damage as well. We're going to be using the Shard of Alexander, the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Spear Talisman, as well as the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. For your flask, you want to use the Thorny Crack Tier for those successive attacks, as well as the Blood-Sucking Crack Tier. And for your buffs, I am using Flame Grant Me Strength and a Dagger with the Golden Vow Ash of War. Now when it comes to your stats, you're going to be using 60 Vigor, 15 Mind, 23 Endurance, 60 Strength, 9 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 40 Arcane. This is going to be a level 150 build, and I think it performs phenomenally. So there are a lot of ways to play Elden Ring, and this one has to be one of the most brain-dead and easy ways to play the game. All you need to do is stand back and just spam the Stormblade Ash of War to gain a very large ranged advantage on your enemy. Now, Stormblade can also be used at close range because you will be able to hit the enemy not only with the Stormblade Ash of War, but with the physical damage of your weapon as well. So for this build, we are going to be focusing on boosting that Stormblade Ash of War as much as possible, because it's going to allow us to sit back, relax, and just spam a very easy high damage Ash of War at the enemy, allowing you to have almost no problem with this game. Now I will say this build does thrive when you are standing behind a summon or the Mimic tier, because that way you can spam at free will and nobody will bug you at all, and you can whittle down the enemy very quickly, allowing you free use of the Stormblade Ash of War, which is what this build is designed to do. Now what's awesome about using the Great Katana with this build is not only does it pair really well with the Stormblade Ash of War, but because it's a Great Katana and has a lot of range to it, you're actually going to start hitting your enemy a lot sooner than you would if you were using just a regular katana, because the range of this weapon is so great. There's also innate blood loss on this weapon, so if you wanted to tweak this a little bit and go a little bit more into the blood loss hemorrhage aspect, you definitely could do so, but I didn't decide to do that with this particular build. We are also using a quality Great Katana with this instead of a Dex Great Katana, just because I got a little bit more of the physical damage aspect with the quality scaling than I did with the dexterity, but this also works incredibly well with a dexterity build. And the last things I want to say about this build is that the actual Stormblade Ash of War is going to give you 10 stance damage every single time you hit, which is not a ton, but I have spammed this enough to the point where I have broken stances, and for an FP cost of 10, it actually does so much damage for the trade-off, which is super nice. So for this build, we are using a quality Great Katana. We have strength and dex at B on this weapon with a quality build, so that's why we're using that. Then we are going to be using the Divine Beast Head, which is going to boost your storms, and then whatever armor you would like to get over the 51 poise mark. For my talismans, I'm using the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, the Shard of Alexander, the Enraged Divine Beast, as well as the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. Now, I was fooling around. If you are using summons with this build, you can replace the Two-Handed Sword Talisman with the Dried Bouquet, allowing your attack power to be raised every single time a summon dies, and it's really fun to pair it with the Soul Jars of Fortune because they die very quickly, and every single time one dies, you will get an attack power boost. For your flask, I'm using the Thorny Crack tier and the Green Burst Crystal tier, but if you want to use more damage, you can always replace the Green Burst with the Blood Sucking Crack tier. Now when it comes to the stats of the build, I have 50 Vigor, 23 Mind, 30 Endurance, 59 Strength, 44 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 25 Faith, and 7 Arcane. This is a level 170 build on New Game Plus 6, and for buffs, I'm using Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. Now this next build we're going to be looking at is a build that I did probably about a year and a half ago. However, with the Shadow of the Erdtree's release, we got a ton of new talismans and things to make this build literally absolutely phenomenal. So this build is going to be emphasizing using the Great Club. This is a fantastic Strength Faith weapon, and this is going to be a level 150 Strength Faith build, allowing us to break stances, get a ton of attack power, and boost our damage like crazy. I always am a big fan of strength builds that have a stagger potential to them, and with the Faith added, giving us the extra boost of damage from Howl of Shabriri, you are going to have no problem staggering enemies, boosting your attack power, and making very short work of most bosses in this game. Now with the Great Club being a colossal weapon, you are going to get an insane amount of stance and stamina damage from the heavy charged R2, and there is a little bit of holy damage attached to this weapon now after one of the previous patches, but we are not going to focus on boosting holy damage at all, because right around the end game in the base vanilla game, holy damage falls off like crazy, so we are going to focus on just boosting our damage like crazy. Now for this build, obviously we're using the Great Club, but we're going to then be using the Rakshasa armor set for that extra damage. We're going to be using the Age 1's Exaltation, the Blade of Mercy, the Axe Talisman, as well as the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. For our flask, we're using the Stone Barb Crack tier and the Blood Sucking Crack tier, and for our buffs, we are going to be using Howl of Shabriri and Golden Vow. For stats, you're going to have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 23 Endurance, 60 Strength, 9 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 40 Faith, and 11 Arcane. This is a level 150 Faith Strength build, and if you are a higher level than 150, I would recommend getting your Strength up a little bit, your Faith up a little bit, and then getting your Endurance to around 30 so you can equip all the armor. Also, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button. It does a ton to help the algorithm push the video even farther, and if you want to support the video in a different way, go to our Patreon, check out all the free stuff we have there. If you want to support there, that's awesome too, but it is not required, and all my videos are going up there first before they come to YouTube. Now what I like about this next dexterity build is the fact that it is so incredibly simple, but since the most recent patch, all stance builds have been absolutely buffed out of their minds. Using Rolana's cameo with the Unsheathe Ash of War is going to completely change the game, giving you somewhere along the lines of a 45% increase in your physical damage when you're using Unsheathe and Rolana's cameo together. It is an absolutely phenomenal combo, and it is incredibly simple like I said, but it performs, which sometimes in Elden Ring, you don't need a ton of different odds and ends to make a build great, but sometimes the simplest builds perform the best. I've absolutely enjoyed playing with this new Rolana's cameo buff since the most recent patch, and there is going to be a top 5 stance builds video coming out in the very near future, so definitely stay tuned for that. Now the last thing that I'm going to say about this build is the fact that Unsheath gives you 2 separate options when using it. You can get a heavy attack using the heavy charged R2 button, or you can get a light attack using your light attack button, and either is going to get boosted by the Rolana's cameo talisman. Either way, you're going to be doing a ton of damage as well as stance damage, having the ability to break stances with ease. Now for this particular build, we are going to be using a Keen Naga Kiba. For our armor, we're going to be using the Okina Mask for that extra dexterity and whatever other armor you would like. Now for your talismans, you want to use the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, the Rottenwing Sword Insignia, the Shard of Alexander, and Rolana's cameo. For your flask, I'm using the Opaline Hard tier and the Thorny Crack tier, but if you would like some more damage and don't need the damage negation, replace the Opaline Hard tier with the Blood Sucking Crack tier. Now for our stats, we are looking at 50 Vigor, 20 Mind, 23 Endurance, 19 Strength, Dexterity is at 78, Intelligence is at 9, Faith is at 25, and Arcane is at 8. For our buffs, we use Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow, and this is a level 150 build recorded on New Game Plus 2. Now this next and last build is going to be a revamp of a build that I have done a few months ago. However, because of Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, we've received some new talismans that make things a lot better and allow you to do more damage. So we are going to be using the Carnival Vessel Candle Stand. This is a really awesome Strength Faith weapon with amazing scaling in both Strength and Faith, allowing allowing you to pour out a ridiculous amount of fire damage to very, very large enemies. Now, this has great scaling in both strength and faith, like I've said, so if you want to get more fire damage out of this weapon, you need to go higher into faith, but if you want more physical damage, we are going to go into strength. Right now, this is a level 170 build with strength at 70 and faith at 40, but you could very easily switch those if you want more of a certain damage type. Now, because this weapon is a great hammer, not only are you going to get an awesome moveset, but you're also going to get really great physical damage. The Surge of Faith Ash of War is where this weapon really shines, and it's going to allow you to plant the candlestand on the ground, causing a massive explosion of fire damage that, like I said, really does better against larger enemies because the explosion just hits such a large area. So for this build, we're going to be using the Cranial Vessel Candlestand. We're also going to be using whatever armor you would like. If you have the Rakshasa set and want to throw that on for extra damage, you're more than welcome to do that. I'm using the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Shard of Alexander, the Great Jar's Arsenal, and the Fire Scorpion Charm for talismans. For my flask, I'm using the Flame Shrouding Cracked Tear and the Spike Cracked Tear. And for my buffs, I'm using Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow, but if you don't necessarily need the extra fire damage, you can use Howl of Shabriri and Golden Vow with the stat spread that we have. So we're going to be using 60 Vigor, 17 Mind, 25 Endurance, 70 Strength, 21 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 40 Faith, and 7 Arcane. Hey guys, there you have it. That's going to be it for our top 5 build video. We have more builds coming and more content coming to the channel, so definitely stay tuned for that. Remember that Patreon is linked down in the description below. It's just a fun way to help support the channel, and the majority of the stuff that's there is free. So remember to subscribe and hit that bell notification on your way out. And until next time, guys, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.